congratulations. Yeah! Woo! It's a good start. How many of you know what GDPR stands for? Cool, I'm not going to quiz you, don't worry. How many of you have had to deal with GDPR at all in your jobs? Okay, awesome. How many of you feel you're totally 100% GDPR compliant? Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, don't worry. I'm not gonna see you. Don't worry, we're all dealing with this, and for many of you, the big date. It was May 25th. I'm gonna tell a story, not too much of what we did exactly, but I want to talk a little bit about what we went through at Assembler and some things that you can take advantage of. So I'm the VP of Engineering at a company called Assembler. I am in the Boston area. John is in the Boston area as well. Many of us, we're distributed around the world. We're a fully distributed team, people all over. So one of the many reasons we're impacted by GDPR. I led a GDPR team within the company. We call ourselves the Avengers to add some amount of fun to having to read through regulations and figure out how we're going to deal with this. I will warn you, I'm not a lawyer, so I have my contact info. You can reach me on Twitter there. I cannot give you legal advice. None of this is legal advice. We're just going to share how we tackle the challenges of GDPR. So we are a company that the core of our product is open edX. Actually, we're one of these companies that's built on what edX is built. So I always like to start learning objectives. What you hopefully will come out of this knowing. First, what GDPR is, if you don't know what it is, and how it impacts you. Understand what the rights of individuals are under the GDPR, and then get some tips for tools that you can use to start to pull apart the challenge of GDPR and make yourself more compliant without having to pay lawyers a lot of money. So this, in a prior version of this talk, I just said it is coming. Now it's already here, so this is a little late. But it already arrived, but it's not too late. It impacts most of us, and we have to deal with this. I'll explain why. The GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, is an EU regulation, so all of us in the US can sit back and not do anything about it. Not true. It applies to EU citizens, it applies to people in the EU, and it's really hard to tell unless you track this information and know exactly, and you're actually checking people's passports. You don't know that the people visiting your site are coming from the EU. They could be running their traffic through a VPN. So the best thing to do is treat everyone equally, which is not a bad thing because individual data privacy is really important. And all of us in this room want our personal data protected. So this is a good thing. It did start on the 25th, and if you want to read the legalese, I have to say I've read a lot, sadly, of legal copy. If you go to this website, gdprinfo.eu, it's actually a pretty readable, compared to most regulations, it's pretty readable. That's intentional. It's meant to be human readable. So this matters because privacy is important, right? It's important to all of us. It is far-reaching. As I mentioned, it's hard to tell who's who, and this is something that people are going to follow. It's likely that folks in the US is going to follow this, maybe at some point. Other countries are likely to follow it, the tenets of this regulation. Also, the penalties are really high. One of the first things that I was asked was, can we basically just ignore it? And that's a real question to ask. Like, what's minimum viable product or acceptance here? Let's just see what happens later. The penalties are incredibly high. This is the low end. 20 million euros is the low end of penalties. The high end is 4% of your top line revenue. That's not great. So unlike some other penalties where you can kind of solve it, like this will absolutely, most companies, this will sink you. So it will put a big dent in your wallet. So it does matter. So questions like what is PII? Any of you who have had to deal with PCI or HIPAA or any other acronyms related to privacy know that this is a little vague. This is not an exhaustive list. This is sort of from the regulation itself. Essentially, it's anything that if you combine one or more of them, you can tell who somebody is. If you looked at any research, you know that with an IP address and one or two actions, you can pretty much tell who someone is. It's really, really easy to tell identity. So we have to be careful with a lot of this information. And Django has a lot of this built in. The user profile has first name, it has last name, it has email address. Right there, it's a ton of PII. It's in every single Django application, so this is really critical. Two quick terms, if you've seen this, and this has to do with who you might be. A data controller is the person that the end user, the individual, talks to, so the person who owns the site. In our case, we help manage and host sites for other people. They're the data controller in our world. We are the data processor. We are processing individual data on their behalf, but it's a big pyramid scheme. We have our own processors as well. I mean, we ship data to Google Analytics. They're a processor for us. And so there's sort of this dependency chain where we have to make sure that everyone down the way is GDPR compliant, which means a lot of auditing. So real quick, data rights of individuals is a lot. We could dig into these, but there are these basic tenets are there. It's when people break into systems, you let people know, breach notification. Being informed is pretty big. We basically let them know what you're doing and why you're using their data. Accessing their data, which is when an individual asks you, what information do you have of me? You have to tell them, and tell them all of it. Rectification, they can fix it if it's wrong. And the big one, erasure. If they want to go away, you have to make them go away. You cannot keep their data. Asterisk, and I'll explain why in a minute. But generally speaking, you have to get rid of their data. You also have to restrict processing, which is, this is the ability where if you don't have to really process their data, they can say, yeah, don't do it. And you can tell them, yeah, you can't use it as part of our site or our application if we restrict, but you have to give them some options there. Data portability is just another version of access. It's essentially access and take it. You can't just show it to them. They actually can take it with them. They can object. And then this one is actually relevant if you're doing any sort of data, like AI or data processing. A lot of us are trying to get out of hiring people to do certain things that we can automate, like automated smarts and make decisions on our behalf. They can opt out of that. That's part of the regulation here. If you are doing something that where computers making decisions that could impact this individual, they can opt out of that, and you have to provide them an alternative, or tell them you can't use the platform. And then this is just something we should all be doing by design, by default. You should be thinking about data protection. It should be built into our systems. So those are all the rights. There's a lot of, if you look online, there's a lot there behind them, but those are the ones to know. So what do? We formed a team. As I mentioned, we called ourselves the Avengers across departments. We looked at the impact of this. We evaluated it. Talked to our customers what they were doing. A lot of them were surprised. They didn't really know. And we built out privacy policies. You notice a word is highlighted here. We did a lot of documentation. A lot of the GDPR is documenting the heck out of everything. It's everything you do. It feels onerous at times, but it's actually kind of a nice thing. You go through and say, well, where's data flowing? And you'll be shocked. Unless you have a very small system, user data is flowing all kinds of places. And it's leaking out places. Every now and then, your CEO might take a copy of the database and play around with it because you want to hack on something. That's a place that data goes. You have to know that it's going there. So documentation is key. There's good tools for this now, which is nice, but lots of docs. So what can you do? Django stuff, there's a lot that you could do, but here's a few sort of high-level ones. User profile built into the system. I mentioned some of those fields before. User is built into the system. Most of us use it. There's user profile, which is pretty common. It's the one-to-one field. There's also abstract user. If you use either of these, there's a tendency to start, especially if your business side folks get a hold of, like, well, let's capture all this data about people. Don't do that. Don't add anything to the user profile unless you really, really need it for your application. Part of this regulation is saying why you need the data. Writing down, we need it for this reason, we use it for this reason. You can then keep it as long as you take care of it, but don't just add data because you want to track it. If there's data that you don't need, you're going to get yourself a world of pain. Cascade is your friend. This is something actually I just learned relatively recently. Is that in Django 2.0, and you know about on-delete? On-delete is mandatory as a 2.0. Cascade, I believe, is still the default, but it was before. If your database supports it, Cascade is good. When you have to do an erasure, having things cascade and remove the user is really useful. Obviously, there are times when you have to go in and modify some of the on-delete methods because there may be special things you've done that are custom. One of the biggest things you can do to help yourself if you're starting from scratch or if you're trying to make this a little more scriptable is to expose APIs. Like, obviously, don't expose them to the world, put them on and off, but for user and actually a lot of your other models, this is a good way when you have to go to retrieval. Set this up. DRF is awesome. If you haven't used Django REST framework, go talk to John about it. John can tell you all about Django REST framework. It's really powerful, and it can talk to, but it's sort of very quickly to set up a really rich set of APIs, and this is really a good way to get user data out of your system. This asterisk here I mentioned before. There are times you don't want to delete data. If you work for a financial firm and you're going to get penalized by the SEC if you delete data, don't delete the data. And that's, the GDPR leaves room for that. If you have to for legal reasons, if you're a hospital, if you're a financial institution, if there's other reason you have to keep this data, you can do that, and you can write it down. You can say, this is why we're keeping it, and they can't sue you, which is good. This is probably the place where you're most likely leaking data. And I don't mean leak, I mean, you all set up for these services. These are great, but you're sending user data over all the time. And it's as simple as adding a few lines, just add this JavaScript, and it's great. And that user data goes everywhere. And so a lot of these sites that you use are, and there's a ton more. I originally had a even bigger logo wall, but this is a representative set. Many of these people, groups have addressed GDPR in some ways. They give you better tooling for it, and they're continuing to improve it, which is great. But you need to know, you need to write down where you're sending this data. So some of these might be surprising if you segment a lot of data routes through there. Pretty good tooling. Google Analytics, also not a surprise. The ones that might be surprising to you, and these are people who may not be here, but if your marketing department is sending things to people, Mailchimp has pretty good tools for GDPR. But the rules have changed significantly. Same thing with HubSpot. Workable is one you might not think about. There are regulations that apply to your HR departments too. We have, many companies just keep people's resumes on file, like, oh, I talked to this person, met him at a conference, this is great. Technically under the GDPR, you have to tell them, you have to go back through and say, like, hey, we have your resume on file, here's why we're doing it. And if they want to remove it, they can remove it. They can remove it. So it applies there, and Google Fonts, a little odd. As we did our privacy policy, we realized that data flows that way too. Google Fonts knows the IP address of the request and sends to the client browser, so that's personal information. So one of the tools we found that made our lives a heck of a lot easier is, I think it's pronounced Ubenda. It's iUbenda. It's an Italian company, and they have a privacy policy builder. That's the way it started. Do not need to hire lawyers. You just pay for this. I think it's like $9 a month for. I'm not at all paid for this. This is just something we found that was really cool. It makes a very readable, human readable version of the policy, which is a requirement. So you go through and you can say things like, hey, we use HubSpot, and we use Analytics and Google AdWords and Discuss and all these others. You choose the tools and it will automatically build this for you. And then as you add new things, you can go and update it. You don't have to go back to your lawyers. You can just update this. You can remove things and add things, and your privacy policy changes. And on the back side of this is the very long legalese that you're required to show. It's still there. It's all automatically generated, but you don't have to write it. You don't have to edit it. You don't have to pay a lawyer.
Does anyone read it?
Sure. No, yeah, that's what I can tell you. So they also, if you go there, they're developing other tools, things like consent tracking and all kinds of other cool GDPR tools. I think they're realizing there's a need here. So I am a huge fan of buy, don't build. And this is a good case. You can buy.
It looks like more people are going to read that than your typical privacy policy, which is just a bunch of like a wall of text where you're just like, yeah, forget this, right? At least that is formatted.
Yeah. There's like icons, yeah, there's definitely, that's the intention. There's actually part of the regulation is you have to do this, you have to make it more readable.
And you said this is a paid service?
It is a paid service, yeah. It's not terribly expensive, certainly compared to lawyers. So the other thing to look at if you want to just see if this even applies to you is GDPR checklist.io, which is an open sourced, this is the GitHub repo you can go and look at as well, contribute to this, but it's like it's a survey. Go take it, figure out if you are, if this applies to you. It will apply to you if you're touching any personal data. If you're doing data science, if you're doing research, if you're a university, it applies to a lot of people. So those are some tools you can take advantage of. I think I'm over my 10 minutes, unfortunately. If you have more questions, ask them now. You can email me here, contact me. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not doing consulting on GDPR, but we have had to tackle this and the challenge. Oh, quick plug, we are also hiring, as many people are. We're fully distributed. Questions? Yes. Good. Oh, we just gave you this, I think.
So let's say you're not dealing with European citizens or
sure.
users from Europe. Can you have in your terms of service, saying that if you are a European citizen, this service is not for you? Let's say if you don't want to go through the hassle.
That's a good question. As far as you can tell, yes, but you have to be able to enforce it and make it really clear. In other words, you have to, they would have to, I guess you could make it as part of your consent, essentially say, like, you're consenting to say that you are definitely not a European citizen. If they say, oh, no, I'm not, and they actually are, then at least you're protected by that. Because you said, well, we asked and we checked, and you did your did your due diligence there. So, but that's it's.
I mean, it's like imposing their rules on, you know.
Well, you're also
I know.
gambling that in the light of Equifax and all these other things, that we won't do something similar.
No,
So
but
there's
at
a
least
lot.
you may have some time.
A lot to
Right
be
now, let's
said.
say you're not there, and you don't want to invest
Sure.
effort in this
Yep.
space. So can you at least
So-
filter them out?
Yeah, if you're willing to close down your business that way, if you can box your business that way, then I would say, yeah, that's a way to do it. But to the point, like we approached it from the standpoint of we don't want to, we have European customers, but we don't want to close our business that way. And we went for essentially, because we're a small team, minimum viable compliance, essentially saying, okay, we've checked these boxes and we're okay. We have tons more to do, we have a huge laundry list of more to do. We felt like, okay, this has gotten us to the point where we're not going to get, we're unlikely to get us to. And a lot of what they have is really in the regulation is they want to see improvement. They want to see that you're taking it seriously. And so if you say, yeah, we did this and here's where we are, and you get a complaint, you can say, well, and here we fixed it and we improved our process, that's what they care about. If the rumor is they're going to come much down harder on people who are like, yeah, I don't care about that. Essentially just and just pay no heed to it. Sorry, you started to.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you could probably get away with that, maybe, but you would wanna get affirmative consent, big checkbox, I am not a European citizen. And you want a big checkbox from a lawyer saying, yeah, this works, and you would have and be paying them a retainer. It's gonna be a good
That's a good point, yeah, I should go back to that.
The problem is if your customers have European customers, you can run afoul of this.
Right.
So.
So, I was working on my podcast. Someone has already come up with the complaint automated generator. And so they can mass mail complaints out. If a company was to receive a complaint, I mean, what is the criteria that you have to take it seriously or not?
Good question. As far as, so again, not a lawyer.
Non-legal
Yeah.
perspective.
As far as, so we have to take it seriously enough, and this is one of the reasons why creating programmatic interfaces that can go look people up is helpful. They have to share some information about them. It's a little odd, right? Because they're sharing information. If you don't actually use it now, you have their information. Can you keep it? I don't know. But what's the lifespan of keeping the record of a complaint, which theoretically has personal information in it? Don't know. But that's where you want to automate, because essentially it comes in and you have to, basically there's a period of time, I think they say it's like 30 or 60 days, you have to be able to respond to them in a reasonable amount of time. You might say, you look them up and say, we actually don't have any information from you in our system, and let it go. So yes, there is I think a risk if they're just overspamming people, we're all going to get flooded. I'm not sure. I don't know what happens then, but.
Okay.
Yeah, I would automate the lookup on your side, and so you can more quickly say, yes, there's something here, we're going to go dig into it, or no, does not, go away.
So if somebody requests information about themselves, what do they have to do to show to you that they are themselves?
That's an awesome question. I have no idea. That's a really challenging problem. Right? Yeah. The best you can do is basically do a confirmation at their email address, right? In other words, if they're using your system, you have to see if they have. I mean, theoretically, someone could compromise that email address, but I would do a.
So you'd have to be like, can you send me this email again from the email address you have in our system?
Okay. Yeah. Which I know is tricky if they've forgotten what that is. Yeah. It's of edge cases.
So what enforcement power does the European Commission have over the US government?
Excellent question. Well, okay, so for us, we have customers that are European customers, and so for us, they ultimately go after our customers, and our customers would get sued, and maybe they sue us, and then they go out of business, and that would be unfortunate. So there are many more multinational corporations now, and so I think they're viewing themselves as a large entity that can lean on the greater corporate network of multinationals and get them to change, and then hopefully get other companies to change. But yeah, can they actually come in here and sue us directly? I don't know. I'm not aware. I don't know. Good question. Yes. Here, can I toss it?
Nice. For open source stuff, so say I'm running some open source project, how does this affect me? So something a person can host themselves for easy.
Cool. Yeah,
How does that happen?
great question. I'm gonna toss it to someone at edX, so we can talk about OpenEdX.
Oh,
no. That's good. Sorry. So I would say it doesn't impact you in that you're not. I wouldn't say you're likely not liable for anything because you're not actually running. But people are running your code, and so what you could do is start to work with others if you have other contributors to work together. Like we're doing this in edX. edX is actually doing a lot of the lift, which is really awesome of them. But we as a community are also getting together and saying, okay, what are the other ways we can make this easier? Their new release is going to have a lot more of this stuff built in and automated, which makes our lives easier, but then we'll look at it and say, great, how can we make this even better? So, yeah, you could, look over your architecture and see if there's ways you can make it easier for people using your tool or your library or package, but.
Well, my main thing was how do I get minimal compliance as a package?
Yeah. Yeah. That's an awesome question. I don't know.
Two things. One, a useful tool that might assist what you're doing in reference to the product. There's a website which is TLDR Legal, which will summarize the different open source licenses, and among them it's like, oh, non-liable, or not liable for blah, and like that's part of many open source licenses. That's plausible, and that would be relevant. Similar question to what you had. Can you give any details on the small company liability waiver in the GDPR?
Not aware about it.
Because there is one.
There is one, yeah.
All I know is that it exists. I don't know
Yes.
what the number is.
There is one. So there are a couple clauses in there that talk about that. Like there's certain things you don't have to do if you're small. You don't have to have a data protection officer. The issue that you basically have less to do, which is nice if you're at that level, and you also there's certain classes of personal information that you are exempted from having to deal with. In other words, you can do it. You don't have to do. There's like a higher bar you have to hit. I don't know all the details because we looked at it. I was like, oh, this is great. We don't have to do. Oh no, we do, because our customers are actually the ones who are data processor. Our customers are liable, and so they are bigger than that limit, and therefore they could we have to help them be successful. So therefore we have to do this. Yeah. Hey, yes, John.
All right. So I assume that you've spent a bit of time on the OpenEdX GDPR channel.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So that channel, is that something that's really just kind of a resource specific to OpenEdX, or would that be like a good channel that would kind of be helpful for the more people than just edX? I'm probably opening up a can of worms here, but I was.
Is anyone here from edX to throw things at John? No, yeah, I would say it is pretty specific. It is pretty specific to OpenEdX. I think there's some general chatter there, but it was pretty specific to it, and a lot of the stuff from there has gone into. There's a bunch of PRs related to GDPR in GitHub, so it's probably more there. So no, I would say probably not.
Thank you.
I mean, if you happen to be in there and ask a drone question that we could all benefit from, then these are actually some really good ones. So sure, we would not kick you out. Yes.
So lately, any site I go to, we see a kind of a blur or pop-up to accept some kind of thing. So I'm guessing it's a GDPR thing. So in the end, they're just having you accept their terms,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah. So right. So the root of that is has anything really changed, right? This was the thing for a long time. Everyone always had these by using our site, you accept our terms, and has that really changed? And I think the short answer is no. If you've seen one of our folks on our team shared this GDPR fails, and one of them was TechCrunch, who had 130 different things you could we sent data to all these people, and you had to toggle them all off individually. And at the end of it all, you still got an ad, which is not really great. So yeah, I don't know. Unfortunately, I think the way people are executing it hasn't really changed. But for those of us, if you do it right, is an opportunity to really respect people's privacy and build great platforms. But I think you're right, a lot of people are taking the, we're just gonna ship it out anyway, like, big wall of slightly easier to read legal text.
So the final thing is, if you're collecting any sort of information, just put it in your disclosure that you are, and that's it.
Yes, you put it in there if you're collecting it, and then you also need, there is a whole consent set as well. You need to know, like, if someone does check that, you need to know, this goes back to the question about you know, they said, no, I'm not a European citizen. You need to know that they said that. You can't just essentially say, oh, everyone who's in our site has to check the box anyhow. You have to be able to say, yes, user X checked this box on this date and accepted it. So there's a slightly higher reporting requirement. So rather auditing requirement.
I was just gonna say to that where, so I think Jeremy, you know more about this than I do, but like at edX, we actually invested a lot of developer resources to work on GDPR. So it wasn't just like legal, you know, wording and you know sign of terms of service. It was actually assessing where is our PII, where are we storing that data. I mean, at edX, it is a learning technology, so a learner's data privacy is very important, and our legal team took it very seriously, as well as our leadership here. And things like forgetting a user, right? So I think there was one slide where you showed like a bunch of things that users are allowed to do. So it's not just a matter of, okay, I'm accepting the terms of service at only that, but it was also like, when I choose to say that at X, you know, please forget me, we have to make sure that we completely eliminate every place where their email address is, where their username is, and whatever. If we want to choose to keep their user record for whatever reasons, we can do that, but we still have to erase their username, email address, and whatnot. We might keep their user ID for other reasons, for tracking or whatnot. But once again, like just like Aaron said, I'm also not a lawyer, but this is how edX chose to do it for that. So we did take it serious, and I think it really depends on the company and also what size you are and what data it is that you are keeping. And I do hope that GDPR does do a great service to our users on the internet. So.
So what happens to the data that you've backed up? Let's say you've got a backup for like 2 years.
Yes.
You have to go and clean that out.
Yeah, so that's something we had to tackle. It's a lot of sort of operational. So. What was that?
No more backups.
No, right? Yeah. There's an age. There are age out. There's a way to basically use age out. I think 2 years is pretty long. If your backup goes back 30 or 60 days, you should be fine. Past that point, you'd have to have some systems to basically unpack the data, delete it, and then repack it, which is not ideal. So if you have to keep data that long. So that's something a lot of people are going back and forth now because the GDPR wasn't super clear on that, on exactly how that would play out. It didn't specify, it didn't say, okay, for backups, do it this way. So people are trying to figure out, well, legally, how can we do this? Can we keep it around? The other thing is analytics. Aggregate records, as far as we can tell, are fine. In other words, aggregates don't have any PII in them. You don't have to go back through and unpack or remove aggregates and re-aggregate them. But if you do have user information in the records, that's where people are starting to say, well, but I still need to know that there's a person here. Can I just blank it out? Can I give them, but I need to know they're unique people. I can't call them all null. I can't, how do we do that? Because that's something that, especially like, my wife, for example, is a researcher. She said, well, they're working on basically generating random IDs after the fact, using that to blank them out, just so that they're at least unique users. Not easy. Yes.
This isn't really a question, but I wanted to say something in defense of privacy policies. Yes, you didn't read it, and neither did I, but somebody did. And I think in that way, privacy policies are a lot like open source software. You use a ton of libraries where you didn't check the code for security vulnerabilities, but you know that since a million other people are using the same library, if there was a vulnerability, probably somebody found it. So there have been a bunch of...
Or everybody has it.
Yeah, or everybody, right. So I think if you're a small company and you have a privacy policy, yeah, probably nobody ever read it. But if it's a big enough company, probably somebody's reading it, and that exerts some kind of pressure, I guess. I know there have been a few incidents, like Instagram updated their privacy policy maybe a year or two ago and said something like, we can use your Instagram photos for marketing and promotional purposes, and somebody found that, got upset, wrote some article that went a little viral, and Instagram had to change that. So I think that the existence of public privacy policies does actually make more privacy protections for us, even if we don't read them. So I think that's a good thing. I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, just like security vulnerabilities, if the package is widespread enough, the researchers will attack it because there's value in doing that. And so once your revenue is high enough, the lawyers will attack your privacy policy because there is incentive if they can put you in a conflict of cash.
Yeah, that's totally true.
So lawyers as vulnerability or security researchers, it's like a whole
So what you're saying is that we should aggregate privacy policies and use a kind of collective open source privacy policy so it'll be vetted by everyone and we all kind of agree this is the one, and that's what GDPR kind of is.
Yeah, but
So
we can't track
that'd
off
be cool.
shit.
I gotta go home and study for the bar, so.
Which bar are you going to be studying at?
Well played.
I think it's commendable. The problem is for small companies, implementing it can be a bit of a burden.
Agreed.
That's the only thing.
I agree.
I like it as a user. But
Sure. No, we're assuming we're a very small company too. So yeah, I totally feel your pain. Trust me.
It starts to be like a basic security issue. There's a lot to be said for knowing what you're doing with PII, not even because you want to comply with GDPR, but because that is its own security issue, and you don't want to be called on it because you didn't watch it. So.
Sounds like it should be part of Django.
Django GDPR.
Yeah, that's a good point.
GDPR scrubbing middle finger.
Django Boston get together and solve that. Thank you.
So thank you again to our speakers, Jeremy Bowman and Aaron Beals. And thank you to all for showing up. And let's see, the next meetup is on July 14th, I believe, Thursday, at Clavio. And they're just outside of, just a walking distance from South Station. And so hope to see you all there. Also, one more thing is that we might need one more speaker for July, but we do need speakers kind of moving forward in August, September, October, not November, because it's like Thanksgiving and not December, and then 2019. So please, we cover a variety of topics. You know, the kind of the rules are is that, you know, your talk is not, hey, work for me, or pitch your product. But it is of something that is of interest to the Django community. You folks, you're the Django community, so you know you kind of see the things that are interesting. So please volunteer something up for talks, and thank you again. What time do we need to kick out of here?
Did Matt already leave?
Say by 8:45.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.